for keeping this holy place open, and for maintaining a temple to poetry in particular. A whole wall. And thick poetry books are thin, so that's why. Yes. So as was mentioned, I'm Julie Sheehan, and I'm standing here because I assumed the absurdly easy role of thesis advisor to Emma Walton Hamilton, a colleague of mine at Stony Brook Southampton's writing program, and the distinguished author of 30-odd books for children. And to my astonishment and to Emma's eternal credit, she took it upon herself to earn an MFA in poetry while herself being a professor of writing. And that tells you something important about Emma, and something about poetry, and something about humility in the face of the sublime, about kneeling at the altar of beauty before offering your own gifts to it. Still, it was an absurd, ridiculous scenario. Me advising or pretending to advise this celebrated author. What possible advice could I give? Well, I have some, but it's not for Emma. It's actually for the rest of us as listeners. First of all, don't be deceived by her charm. This advice is very hard to follow because her poems are enormously charming. They're witty, optimistic, approachable. They're impeccably dressed in meter and rhyme. She plays tennis with the net up, as Robert Frost had it in his figure. He thought free verse was playing tennis with the net down. But the outward, and this is another Robert Frost quote, the outward charm is a momentary stay against confusion. That's what he thought a poem was, a momentary stay against confusion. And disorder hangs in the balance with order, and life is messy. So listen for those moments when the charming mask slips and we glimpse the glorious mess behind it, the broken spigot, or the tuning fork that turns up out of place. The other thing is enjoy the history, including local history, that this worldly writer brings to her work. For example, you'll meet one William Arthur Morris, the author's great-grandfather, who sold his poems door to door as if they were commodities, as if they were dry goods. He's the one human being I can say with certainty had an even more absurd job than mine as thesis advisor. But the title Door to Door also defines the length of a journey. When we measure it from door to door, we include the extra hassle and fuss of that last mile. The closer we get to arrival, the slower we go. And research tells us that the likelihood of having a car accident increases the closer we get to our own homes. And it's that radius of accident in which many of these poems take place. They are tuned to the disturbances that come precisely because we think nothing unusual will happen. And now, let the journey begin. Emma Walton Hamilton.
Thank you, Julie. Can you imagine how much fun it is to take a class with Julie? So yes, Julie was not only my trusted thesis advisor, but also my most favorite teacher. I took many, many classes with her. She taught me everything I know about poetry. And she's just the most amazing person as well as poet, and I am indebted to you. She also told me at the end of my MFA, she said, poets submit their poems, to contests and competitions, and you need to start sending your poems out. And I said, really? And she said, yes, have a look and find some contests that are compatible with the kind of thing you do. And so I did, and I rather quietly sent a few, maybe 6 or 7 poems out to various different contests. And one of them, which you'll hear tonight, featuring William Arthur Morris, my great-grandfather, was a winner and won first prize in the Bridgeport Prize, and completely astonished me and took my breath away. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get to it. I thought what I would do tonight is focus on the Sag Harbor centric poems, the poems closest to home. Some of you have heard me read before, and I thought it might be nice to change it up a little bit. You'll hear some of the same poems I've read before, but I also thought it might be nice to kind of keep the focus local tonight, and with a little departure here or there. But I'll start with just a little amuse-bouche, as they say, about poetry. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Do I need to? Yeah, okay. This poem is called Revision. I peel the poem like an orange, revealing all the flesh and juice beneath. Or maybe it's an onion, with each layer becoming more translucent and refined. But then, perhaps an artichoke is best, with every leaf containing its own message, preparing me, one nibble at a time, to find the sweet and salty part within. All right, we will move now, as Julie mentioned, to that elusive tuning fork, which resides in my bathroom. This is a very local poem, and it's based in truth. Its title is The Tuning Fork in the Bathroom. Head erect and tines astride, the armless conductor invites the chamber to resonate with acoustic assonance. But there are no strings in this ensemble, no ebony or brass, only porcelain and tile, glass and chrome. Where has it come from? Who stationed it here? And what is the value of sine waves at the fundamental frequency in this miniature suite? I relocate this pitchfork, but it invariably returns to its post between the his and hers sinks, harmonizing with each brush and flush, and humming while I fiddle with my hair, pick or pluck at minor divertissements, and compose myself in prelude to the day.
That's good.
I'll move now to a poem called Relocation. Today's walk on the beach yields a cluster of treasures, each its own biosphere. A moon snail accommodating someone else's eggs. A family of slipper snails clinging to a scallop. A quahog clam teeming with seawater and sand. A micro-ocean. The host shells are otherwise empty, neither landlord nor tenants having anticipated the tide or the inevitable seagull. I played God for a moment, placing each one gently back in the surf, cleaving to hope.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move now to global warming. The burst spigot sprays the river birch with upside-down rain, sheathing every branch in frozen glass. 100 slender jewel cases, refracting winter light and magnifying the showpiece within. One by one, the casings drop to the pockmarked snow beneath, fractured vials littering the walkway, leaving hungover branches to droop and drip in memory of crystal-induced radiance. And this is Global Warming Part 2. Doesn't apply to this winter, unfortunately. At what point in this roller coaster of a winter did the pylons catapult from their beds? Somewhere between the accelerating wind and plummeting temperatures, beneath summits of snow and immeasurable ice, they broke their banks. I imagine their thrill in time-lapse mode as they defied nature, logic, and gravity, groaning with every thrust and corkscrew turn, lurching to dizzying new heights. They never guessed the ride would be one way, or that their lack of restraint would leave them exposed, camel-backed and teetering on the edge of Payne's Creek. Let's see, we're going to move now to a little further west. You'll hear the children's author in me coming out of this one. Hang on. There it is. This one is called, this is based on a true story, and this is called Whodunit. Applebee's Alligator might be the title of a children's book, in which the toothy hero dons an apron and discovers his calling, serving up good food for good people, carside to go. But the character who parked his pet by the mastic Shirley Applebee's in a small plastic tub with "My Gator" scrawled along the side probably had a different story in mind. Maybe his takeout double crunch shrimp had just become finger food. Or was it the perfect alibi he saw posted in Applebee's window proclaiming, "Shirley, Long Island's best kept secret"? This is a poem dedicated to my daughter. And her name is Hope. And on the eve of her birth, we were gifted a beautiful climbing rose by the name of High Hopes. And this poem is called High Hopes. Despite susceptibility to stress, aphid, canker, beetle, blight, or gale, your rosy face and valor still impress, and toughened by each hardship, you prevail. Like you, she has her challenges to face. You've more in common than your fitting name. She copes with wit, ferocity, and grace. Your radiant strength of spirit is the same. Yet you, with lanky stem, bowed by your height, a too tall lady slouching in her stance, now nod toward the wind, and with delight accept his invitation to the dance. Oh, let her your resilience acquire, for hope you give, and hope you may inspire. We'll go a little bit darker now. This poem is called Murmuration. And for those of you who might not know the term, it refers to enormous congregation of birds when they gather together, as they often do in a particular tree outside our house. The wanderers gaze in awe at the shape-shifting cloud, swirling and twisting into startling formations, first an orb, now a leaping porpoise, a bow, even a starling itself. One morphing mass of individuals, fainting and diving in simultaneous waves of life energy, the velocity of one affecting the whole in scale-free correlation. Every shift is a critical transition, a synchronized orientation of magnet shards, drawn together and apart, electron particles spinning and aligning. The observers murmur and gasp, enthralled by the beauty and harmony of the display. Oblivious to the raptor just outside the margins, or near the darkest center of the cloud, where individuals are packed the tightest. And some of you will recognize this particular news story. This is Eruption. The fact that most of the island is sewerless was apparently news to those who escaped their seaside cottages and mansions, unaware that septic tanks needed to be emptied regularly. Systems designed to handle a certain amount of flow per day soon failed. And failure isn't pretty, whether it's lawn seepage or backing up into the basement, the tub, the washer, the toilet, wherever it can go. And when they weren't wading in their own waste, many were scrambling to buy ammunition. I guess the news wasn't shitty enough. This is a poem dedicated to our late Irish Terrier. It's called Elegy for an Irish Terrier, dedicated to Nell. A model of your standard, you were not. And though you had your charms, I must confess, your breath was foul, your teeth were black with rot, your oily skin discouraged a caress. You lounged around, then slept all afternoon. You wouldn't catch a ball and didn't swim. The gas you passed could empty a saloon. Your eyesight and intelligence were dim. Perhaps your hair, a dirty shade of red, accounted for some quirkiness and pluck. You shredded Kleenex, stole and ate our bread, and despite your Irish genes, had rotten luck. This epitaph might come as a surprise. You were the apple of your mistress's eyes. I'm going to segue now to some poems that I wrote as part of an exercise that Julie gave us. We had the great good fortune in Julie's class to be visited by a wonderful poet by the name of Marilyn Nelson. And Marilyn had written an extraordinary collection of poems, short collection of poems called Fortune's Bones. And these poems were written in the voices of several different real-life historic characters. First, Fortune, who was a slave to a doctor in Connecticut, and also the doctor and Fortune's wife. And I was so deeply moved by this series of poems, and also poems in the voice of Fortune himself. And Julie gave us the assignment to write a poem in the voice of a historic character that interested us. I'm just going to instead of trying to explain it to you, I'm going to read the author's note at the back about these poems, because I had such a good time with the exercise that I ended up writing 7 poems in the voice of this character. I won't read them all here tonight, but I will share a couple of them. The section of poetry is called the Swamp Angel Poems. Some of you may know this historic figure. He was born and raised in Sag Harbor. His name is Prentice Mulford. Prentice Mulford was a 19th century author and philosopher, born, raised, and buried in Sag Harbor, New York, where I live. These poems are inspired by his memoirs, in which he chronicles his time living off the grid in a cabin he built in a New Jersey swamp while commuting daily to New York City to write news stories for the New York Daily Graphic. I first came across Mulford when exploring our local cemetery in my teens. His epitaph reads, "Thoughts are things, Mulford." I found this intriguing, and all the more so several years later when I discovered a small book entitled Thought Forces, penned by Mulford, on my mother's bookshelf. It was inscribed to her by my late great-aunt, a converted Christian Scientist from England who adhered to Mulford's philosophies. Mulford's father passed away when his son was just 14, leaving his child the sole proprietor of the Main Street Hotel he owned and managed. That would be the Mansion House Hotel, later the Union Schoolhouse, and now our municipal building. This was a responsibility which proved too great as the business went bankrupt 4 years later. Mulford spent the next 4 years in restless exploration, moving from job to job and generally acquiring the reputation of a ne'er-do-well. At 22, he sailed for San Francisco during the last wave of the gold rush. He sought his fortune first in Jamestown as a seagull egg sorter, cook, miner, school teacher, and lecturer, respectfully. At one point, he ran for mayor, but he lost because his speeches were too flamboyant. When the local river flooded, destroying the entire summer's mining efforts, he penned a humorous essay for the newspaper and signed it Dogberry, after the blustering police constable of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. Dogberry's work caught the eye of the editor of the Golden Era, a prominent literary journal, and Mulford was invited to join the staff. He soon became a fixture in San Francisco's literary circle alongside Mark Twain, Bret Harte, and other members of the Bohemian set. Mulford remained uneasy in his skin, however, and in his early 30s he converted to spiritualism. In the first of several attempts at a hermitic lifestyle, he bought an old whaleboat and spent the next few years living in San Francisco Bay, wearing only a weather-worn knitted union suit. He continued to write, alternating between Dogberry's mischievous reportage and his own musings on mental and spiritual laws. Mulford's friendship with Twain led him to London, where he was received as one of America's foremost writers, though he remained reluctant to accept the praise. There he met a girl named Josie Allen, whom he later married, and when the couple returned to the States, he worked as a comic lecturer, poet, essayist, and news columnist. This latter job he found increasingly depressing, being, quote, thoroughly saturated with the horrors consequent on civilization. His marriage foundered, apparently due to his relative disinterest in money. Josie resorted to nude modeling to augment their income, a fact which Mulford is said to have discovered by opening a pack of cigarettes, inside which was his wife's portrait. Returning to solitude, he built himself a one-room cabin in the swamps of Passaic, New Jersey, where he lived, Thoreau-like, for the next decade. It was there that he wrote his memoir, along with his life's work, 36 volumes on spiritualistic and theosophic science, which were eventually serialized by his friend and publisher F.J. Needham as the White Cross Library. At the age of 57, Mulford decided to return to Sag Harbor for good. His mother and sisters still lived there, and he had from time to time made visits to the island in a 16-foot dory, which he called the White Cross. The little boat was kitted out with a stove, awning, bunk, and lockers for his provisions, writing utensils, and banjo. When thus equipped, Mulford set out for home. Less than a week later, the boat was discovered floating in Sheepshead Bay. Having suffered an apparent stroke, Prentice Mulford appeared to have died peacefully in his sleep, though alongside him were several letters written during the journey, referring, among other things, to a desire to, quote, get out of the world. I remained fascinated by his story over the years, and at one point, I wrote an article about him for our local newspaper, the Sag Harbor Express. A poetry exercise based on a historical figure inspired me to take on Mulford's voice. So, I still visit Prentice Mulford whenever I go to Oakland Cemetery. And these poems are dedicated to him. This is Swamp Angel. 2 years of my 49 spent as an indifferent sailor. 12 in California, digging a little gold and a good deal of dirt. I have taught school, tended bar, kept a grocery, stacked mail, collected tax, policed men, sorted seagull eggs, started a hog ranch, and prospected for silver. I ran a hotel into the ground and a farm to weeds. I killed a coyote. I have seen Cape Horn, London, Paris, Vienna, a whale in a flurry, and a ship's crew in mutiny. I have lectured and written for the papers. I have an ex-mother-in-law. And the world has returned kick for kick, frown for frown, smile for smile. But I have had no adventure, no success, no failure as great as in this house I built, in the woods, in a swamp, with a spring nearby, beside a noble, wide-branching oak. My faults, whatever they are, within these four walls trouble no one but myself. I can leave my slippers as I took them off, one toe pointing north, the other south, and find them a week afterward in the same position. I fear not to leave mud on my own carpet. I am tormented by no neighbor's culinary smells. I keep hens. Yet I have hardly touched the edge of life, and know little what it means to live, save thoughts are things. This poem is called Thought Forces. Thoughts run in stream-like currents, fine rills of life feeding life, or injurious poisons, stinging all they touch. The arrow tipped with ill will is deadliest to its archer, and fear and fault attract more of their currency. But the open heart invites positive force, globules of quicksilver melding to become one body which, when sparked, ignite the power within. This is the commute. Each morning I foot the mile to the railway station and reach the city by 7:30. At the newspaper office I make a summary of the same eternal round of events. Murders, burglaries, suicides by pistol, razor, rope, or poison. Embezzlements, high-toned. Thefts, low-toned. Smash-ups, fires, burst boilers, falling elevators, gas explosions, kerosene burnings, failures, and everything else, which happens in all civilized communities just the same, one year after another. The only difference being that the victim, or the villain, has a different name this year from the same date last. I wonder why people are interested in reading such a monotonous and ghastly catalogue of horrors as I dish up for them daily. I wonder if they will so continue to read through all eternity, in case their lives are spared that somewhat incomputable period. I wonder what the profit is of knowing, after you have eaten your breakfast cakes and sausage, that a tramp was found last night hanging from a tree in Central Park. Or that an idiot killed himself with prussic acid and died on a park bench, where possibly you may sit tomorrow, because the girl he wanted to marry and make miserable preferred to be married and made miserable by some other idiot. Yet I serve up this intellectual stew made from the ingredients of our barbaric civilization with a tolerably clear conscience. First, because I am well paid for it. Second, because I like the work. And third, because the public wants their daily horrors spiced as I spice them. Then I fly back by rail to my beloved swamp, where I labor until dusk, overlooked only by an occasional crow perched on a neighboring sycamore, cross, tired and hungry, because there is no young corn yet to pull up.